Imagine, just imagine waking up every day knowing that you have a permanent contract at the United Nations. How does it feel? We'll cover it in this video. My name is Wiola and I'm the founder of IOReady, International Organizations Ready, and our mission is to share knowledge, information, and insider insights about international organizations from someone who worked for the EU, UN, and the OECD. In this video series, How to Get a Job at the UN, we are covering all things United Nations. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the benefits of having a permanent contract at the United Nations. If you have watched our previous videos about contract types and UN grades, and if you haven't, you can still watch it right here, I explained the differences between the different contract types and also the different UN grades, all that determining whether you do or do not have a permanent contract at the UN. But today we are dreaming. Imagine that you actually did get the most sought out contract type at the United Nations. What kind of benefits can you get from that? Permanent positions at the United Nations come with a very comprehensive package, and we're going to discuss exactly what you can expect from that package. Benefit number one, job security. Unlike any other contract type, permanent positions are probably the only ones that give you a long-term stability in terms of your employment. A permanent position offers a very stable job on a particular post for a prolonged period of time, if not forever. It offers employment stability and reduces stress from contract insecurity. It lets you focus on your work instead of worrying about your next position and another contract type within the United Nations. The organization is responsible for making sure that you always have a job within the UN system. Thanks to that, you can really focus on your responsibilities and on making an impact within the UN rather than focusing on thinking about your next job or applying for those jobs or trying to figure out your next steps in your career. It takes away an immense pressure in this very unstable sector and also allows you to settle for a little bit longer, especially if you have family and children. Having a permanent contract at the UN doesn't mean that you're not going to relocate, but it does mean that you're going to have stable employment conditions. If you're working on a consulting contract or if you're in a fixed term position, you don't have a guarantee that your contract is going to continue.
It is my birthday this Sunday, the 22nd of June, and I really wanted to give you a special gift for this occasion. This is why with code BIRTHDAY, you'll get 30% off my online course for IOs and NGOs until midnight of the 22nd of June 2025, Central European Time. Enjoy!
Benefit number two, competitive salary. A position as a permanent staff at the UN has a very, very good salary, which, as we have discussed in the previous video, you can actually check out on some of the official websites because these are formally and officially regulated. Here, we not only have the very high salary adjusted to duty station and your seniority, you also have post-adjustment salary, which means that your salary is based on the purchasing power of the salary in a specific country. That means that your salary on the same position could differ significantly from living in Geneva to living in Nairobi to living in Bangkok, and this is officially regulated within the UN as well. In terms of financial support, if you have children within the UN system on a permanent position, you also get a dependency allowance. So if you have a spouse, if you're married, or if you have children, you're eligible to receive a specific stipend on top of your salary to support your children and your partner to live with you in a UN location. There are also some of the other extensive allowances and benefits. For example, a housing allowance. In some duty stations that are particularly expensive, there is housing subsidy that is offered to specific UN staff. Educational grants that cover fees for children if they go to school up until a certain stage. So for example, if you were living in Nairobi and your children were going to an international school, the school fees would be covered by the United Nations. You also have some hardship allowances. So in case that you are working in a hard duty station, you're getting a compensation for that time as well on top of your regular salary. If you're working in South Sudan or Afghanistan, you might be compensated with some extra money for working in challenging conditions. Relocation and repatriation allowances would basically help you move from a country to country. So let's say if living in Paris, I got a position in Bangkok, the UN would pay for the relocation of my furniture, of all of the things that I have here in Paris to support my move to work on the position within the UN as a permanent staff. And reversely, if I wanted to come back to Paris, then they would also pay for my relocation back here. Next, we have health and insurance coverage. So not only we have the health insurance, but also life insurance provided by the United Nations in case something happened to you while you are working. This offers high quality medical treatment, but also protects your family in case of disability or death of you. We also have some retirement benefits. Within the UN, there is the UN Joint Staff Pension Fund, which is a pension plan that provides retirement security. If you have been working for the UN for a couple of decades on a permanent contract, then you're pretty covered in terms of your pension after your career is over. This is tricky though, because not a lot of people have a chance to have decades on a permanent contract within the United Nations. But if you're one of the lucky ones, then you have a pretty good pension for life. And then there are some diplomatic status privileges. So, for example, you have the diplomatic immunity. You enjoy this immunity from legal processes in relation to the work that you perform. For example, if you have been performing specific actions within the UN, you cannot be sued by a country for the actions that you have been taking as an employee. You also have visa and residency privileges. As a permanent staff at the United Nations, you're able to have your visa taken care of much faster in a very specific manner, and you have some residency privileges as well. Benefit number 3 is that you have opportunities for professional development. Now, when you're working at the UN, you always have opportunities for professional development. But when you're a permanent staff, they reach to the new horizons. For example, if you're working on a specific, let's say, P4 or P5 position, then you have access to coaching that is provided to you by the United Nations to improve how you perform on your job. Benefit number 4, networking opportunities on a pretty high level. You can always network with people, but there's something about the permanence of your contract that allows you to build more stable relationships, because you know that you're not going to change your job within the next 2 years, that you're actually going to dive deeper into the job that you are performing and an organization within which you're working in. That makes it easier to talk to people. It makes it easier to keep connections with people and to be able to form long-term partnerships with influential leaders, high-level policy makers within other international organizations, but also with the national governments in which the UN offices are based in. Let's move to my favorite part of this series, which is the Q&A from our I Already audience. Question number 1. How long does one need to work for the UN to be able to be eligible for the permanent contract? That's a very tricky question, because your permanent contract does not depend on how many years you spend within the United Nations. Sadly, there is no simple solution in terms of getting a permanent contract. Sometimes people enter the UN on the permanent contract, which would obviously be the most ideal situation. However, very often people work for 10, 20, 30 years and then never get the permanent contract. So it really depends on your specific situation, on your nationality, on the agency that you're working on, and on the specialization that you have. The issues with the UN permanent contract is that it's not a linear contract. So there is no natural progression from P1 to P2 to P3 and on at some point permanent position. It really depends on the opportunities that you have ahead of you. So you may be working for the United Nations for 20 years and then never get a permanent contract. And a lot of people don't. Question number 2. What steps do I need to take to transition from a fixed term contract to a permanent contract? So we have a couple of avenues in terms of what you can do to influence your transition into a permanent contract. Usually there is a diplomatic selection process. That means that there is a concours, as we say in French, where you need to go through a lot of different examination processes and succeed in them to be able to get a permanent post. These steps very often include a written exam, an oral exam, or video interview exam. There's a panel interview, sometimes even an assessment center to allow you to have a permanent contract. Question number 3. What is the average age or grade to get a permanent contract? It is more likely that it is a P1 position or P5 position. Positions from P3 to P5 are definitely more likely to be on a permanent contract, but again, it doesn't mean that every single P3 grade contract is going to be a permanent one. But it is definitely more likely that you're going to enter a P5 position with a permanent contract rather than a P1 position on a permanent contract. Usually the P1 and P2 positions are of fixed term contracts. P3, it depends. I have been seeing a lot of jobs on the P3 grade level that are either fixed term contracts or permanent contracts. So it really depends on the opportunity. That's it for this video. Thank you very much for exploring together with me the benefits of a permanent contract at the United Nations. Stay tuned for the next video in this series. I'll see you then. Bye!